Hello and welcome to Scale to Seven Figures and our Million Dollar Fireside Chat. I am Lisa Anderson, Strategic Business Advisor, Virtual CFO with Novel Transformation Solutions and your Million Dollar Mentor. And I am excited you are joining me. Scale to Seven Figures is an interactive group of small business owners in the business to corporate, and business to government markets who are ready to scale their businesses to the next level. Our group is an opportunity to share, learn, and grow together without competition. Each week, I bring tips, tactics, and strategies through our Million Dollar Masterclasses and our Million Dollar Fireside Chats. If you are not familiar with us, head on over to www.scaletosevenfigures.com and check us out. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy our next powerful conversation. Well, good evening, and thank you for joining us for another Million Dollar Fireside Chat. And I'm very excited to have everybody join us this evening. The theme for this month, the theme for the month of August is getting back to basics, the COVID edition. And we will be discussing ways to get back on track and embracing new normals while we continue to thrive in uncertain times. August is typically the time of year when we are wrapping up summer and getting the kids ready to go back to school. But this year is quite different. This year, we are preparing to get, as business owners, we are preparing to get our teams, our families, and our systems, and quite frankly, our mindset ready to create balance in this season because it is absolutely necessary. This is a season to let go of fragility. So don't be fragile. We want to let go of that and instead step into agility so that we can create some flexibility and step away from surrender, build strength, and then manage our way to sail through this next decade. I've been having conversations with business owners today about how 2020 was our opportunity to step into a new decade. That we, at the top of the year, we were all planning to step into a new decade. But when we look at the astrological calendar, the new decade really doesn't begin until January of 2021. So 2020 was getting us ready, really shaking us up to set us up and get us prepared for a time in life where we have no opportunity to look back. It's all about forward motion and looking forward. So agility as a business owner, in my opinion, is your million dollar proposition in this season and beyond. Companies who are flexible, that are going with the flow of change, that are predicting and stepping into and creating what will be the new normal way of life. Those are the companies that are prospering, are preparing to continue to thrive and continue to build their legacies. So it's a season to gain from disorder. It's also a season to start to value partnerships even stronger than we've valued them before. It's time, y'all. If you have not recognized it, if you didn't realize it up until this point, but it is time to stash some cash. You want to stash cash so that you can create the foundation, the strong foundation to continue to thrive in the years to come. It's time to leverage the strength that you've gained under stress, because that's what we've been. We've been stressed a little bit, but that stress created a stretch for us. And it's time to build strength through that process. And quite frankly, continue to build your million dollar enterprise. Tonight, we're going to start the process of balancing that new normal. We're going to start that discussion and the new normal of homeschooling and virtual learning while building a business and balancing our family lives. My guests this evening are virtual educators and co-authors of the book, You Are the Revolution, Education that Empowers Your Black Children and Strengthens Your Family. I have Drs Kimberly Douglas and Robin Harwick who are joining me, and they will be sharing tips, strategies, and insights around business, family, and education. So get ready as I welcome these ladies to the show. Good evening. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Excited to have you guys here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Excited to be here as well.
And I know you have been creating new normals probably for several months.
Yeah.
Yes, preparing for what, what was to come, right? Through experiencing some of the things that we've experienced over the last couple of months.
For sure.
So before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and then share with us a little bit about your individual companies?
Okay. I'm Dr. Kimberly Douglas, and I'm the president and CEO of Remote Learning Solutions. And my company builds and creates online courses and also coaches other people to do the same. And I am one of the co-authors of You Are the Revolution, education that empowers your Black child and strengthens your family. And I'm really excited to be here today and really pleased and excited about the theme of agility, because that is the mindset with which we approach this book. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how we got to the book.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Harwick, and I'm the founder and director of The Pearl, a remote democratic high school. I'm also a researcher and a co-author with Kimberly and an author in a lot of other settings as well.
Yes, absolutely. So tell me, you mentioned that agility was the mindset around creating the book, developing the book, and co-authoring. And prior to coming on this evening, we had a brief conversation about your book. So I'd like to dive in there. Let's talk about that a little bit. How did you come together to create this collaboration? Have you guys known one another for a while?
We've dated our relationship back to April 16th, 2020. So we're old friends.
You said April 16th, 2020.
2020. Yes.
Oh,
I think that's
goodness.
what I said. This year.
Yeah, that's right.
Year.
Wow. So you met in 2020 in April. So that was what, almost 4 months ago, right? Exactly. And you wrote a book, published this out there, and wow.
And we started a school.
We started a school and wrote a book together since April.
And started a school.
Yeah.
Wow. So the school that you started, were you kind of teaching, developing curriculum, delivering curriculum during this time while the children were, now starting to step into the homeschooling space?
Yes, I was teaching here. I live in Mexico, and I was teaching at a small school in Mexico. I'm an educator by training and have taught at the university level, but I really wanted to get back and re-engage with youth. I had a strong desire to never be one of those professors that you're sitting in their class and you're thinking, when was the last time you saw a youth? And I was missing being more engaged with the community. So I came back to teach. And then we went in March, we went into lockdown here. And my son is 16 and he was going to that school as well. And we had done homeschooling before. And once we were home, a lot of things came together that really he prefers the homeschool environment and also the democratic environment, which we didn't have at the school I was teaching. And so he actually gave me the idea. And he barely remembers saying it because to him, it was just a flippant remark that he doesn't even really think about. But he said that I should start my own school. And I took it seriously, I guess, because here we are.
Wow.
And it's the school that brought us together. Yes. Because there was a day when I was being a business owner and I put a provocative question on Facebook and to ask people if they wanted to create a course or start a school. I don't even remember.
You specifically said, is there anyone out there that wants to start a school? I was like, twice in 1 week, I'm getting this message. And we connected at that point.
Right.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely agility.
Yes,
for sure.
It is
fluid and transparent and just being able to move with the flow. during a time when many were struggling to try to figure out that, the floor was wiped out from underneath them.
Yeah.
And you created, like I said earlier, you created structure and strength through the stress of the moment.
And going back to what Robin was saying earlier about the homeschool environment and her son appreciating that environment, I think it's because both of us have taken non-traditional paths and we're a bit introverted. And so when we had to hunker down and we had to really focus on things, we really started to see the opportunities that are out there. And what it did for me personally, it just kind of quieted the world in a way that helped me think and process better. And I'm a person where I look at patterns. I'm always reading the tea leaves. And I just saw, and Robin saw, this need to have a conversation to reassure parents that they're okay and they have what they need to take care of their children, whether it's because during the time we met, schools were letting out and people were still thinking that they were going back to school that school year. And we were saying, no, I don't think that's going to happen. And then once the reality of that kicked in, you could hear the collective self-doubt on Facebook. And you could hear parents, or when they had to do worksheets at home and they had to bring the curriculum home, you could hear people just feeling like they weren't living up to expectations. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And these are also while they're trying to do their jobs. And so we were saying, no, this is not good. I mean, parents are doing the very best that they can. And what was happening was their contributions were being undervalued. And that's one of the things we really were speaking to in writing this book.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the book, if you don't mind. Tell us what the premise is and what your objective is in terms of what do you want parents to be able to take away from it?
I got the nod. I think, one of the things that we really wanted to switch the narrative around the deficit mindset that's out there. And also what we're focusing on at this time period, because one of the things that Kimberly and I talked a lot as we were getting together and starting to come up with the ideas for the book was that, the focus was on academics, even when we first went into lockdown. And people weren't giving the space for the reality that we were crisis schooling. We're not homeschooling. We were taking a in-person school curriculum home, which is very different than homeschooling, which is intentional and people are choosing that pathway. And even for people that are homeschooling, we're still crisis schooling because we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
And so we really want to, empower parents to push back against that deficit thinking and the culture of the United States right now that is saying, you can't do this. And there's a lot of narrative around there telling parents that they can't. And, you hear that enough times and we know we internalize that. And so we're saying, no, you can. And we're going to give you some tools and some things to think about to help you with that. And I'll pass the ball to Kimberly there.
Okay. So, and Robin mentioned this focus on schoolwork. So we were looking at, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It says you have to start with your safety and security first, then your feeling of being loved and belonging, then self-esteem, then self-actualization. So a lot of the narrative about what happens at school is about that top part, about the academics. But we're saying that while school was in session and they were in brick and mortar buildings, there was a lot happening there that did not support the well-being of Black children in particular. And during a pandemic, it is counterproductive to just focus on that top part where you're worried about academics, because that's about a lot of other things, not necessarily about the child. We're saying start here with the well-being, checking in with kids, seeing how they're doing. And it's really interesting that that academics was the focus, because before this happened, schools were saying 21st century education, 21st century education, 21st century education. Well, guess what? The 21st century happened. And
It's
schools
over.
were ready for the 21st century.
Right.
Because this is what the 21st century is. It's
Yeah.
interconnectedness. It is somebody sneezes in China, we blow our nose in the United States. That's what the 21st century is. And when it happened, when it took out a tax on us, we weren't ready for it. And so there's this question in the first place about whether or not school was preparing kids for the 21st century. So then for parents to be held up to this standard where you have to do all these worksheets, you have to do this, you have to do that, that just doesn't make sense. Because see, now we have this conversation about, are kids learning what they need to learn in the first place? And with 21st century and just education period, education is about being able to solve your own problems.
Mm.
And what we saw was that there were things being delivered that didn't help people solve their own problems. Perhaps it showed them how other people could solve their problems, or it showed them what they needed to learn, but really what they needed was to know how to learn and how to think critically. And there's just a lot of interesting things that have happened in this period. And I always want to acknowledge that there's been many hardships to families, a lot of deaths. I always want to acknowledge that. But it's also been an opening for a lot of people, and myself included. And I think Robin has had the same experience. It's like the world has opened up in so many ways, and we're able to have conversations that we didn't have before, and to think about ways that that we can serve kids better, in particular Black children, better in this society.
Yeah. So you ladies said a lot. And I kind of want to go back and talk about some of the areas that you brought up, some of the concerns. So teaching parents, how to step away from crisis schooling, and I guess what I say is find the gaps. You say deficit schooling, right? Parents have had, and my audience are parents who own businesses, right? They're entrepreneurs. They've had several months this year of trying to step into that, trying to figure it out, managing through the crisis. And a lot of them have done a great job. What are some of the key concerns? No, I don't want to ask that question. The question I have is, do you see that they've had enough time to figure some things out and be prepared to step into an environment now that's best suited for their children to learn from a virtual standpoint? Or do you feel that they're equipped to make those decisions right now? What are you finding in terms of the time span that they've had and where they are now? And then in 30 days, less than 30 days, they're going to have to jump into something. They're going to have to make some type of decision as it relates to their child's education.
Well, I think what I like to invite parents to think about is the pressure is external. It's not real. And Kimberly and I were doing a book talk, actually, and a woman put in the chat that she missed school for an entire year because her country was at war. And, everybody, they were able to regain their education once they were no longer in that crisis situation. And so from her perspective was like, Americans, you need to chill out. You guys aren't at war, stay home, stay safe, and just relax into it. So one of the things that we know about learning is that learning happens everywhere. In fact, Kimberly posted a meme just recently about it, right? And so if parents think about where does the learning occur? And for your audience in particular, it's great because entrepreneurs know this. They're keeping their eyes open. They're always kind of taking temperature checks of what's going on around them. Kids are doing that naturally too. So they are learning, and they are learning probably very, very different things than what we think they need to learn right now, but they know what they need to learn right now. And we have to have trust in our kids to let them lead. And when we can do that, that takes a lot of the pressure off of us. That's the democratic education model, is around students having choice and students leading in their own learning and following their own interests. And we know that the richness that comes out of that, instead of having this very structured curriculum where kids only learn certain things, they go deeper and they learn, more breadth often, because they're, kids are naturally curious. And so when we let them have that spaciousness, they learn in ways that we wouldn't have even come up with. So I think, that kind of answers your question. Is no, they're not probably ready. We're not ready for what 30 days is going to look like from now, because with our students, we don't know on Monday if what they were really into on Friday is still the thing they want to continue studying, because that's natural development of kids. They're studying about bees, and while they're studying about bees, they find a particular type of plant that is, the bees are attracted to, and then they decide they wanted to learn more about, plants and natural environments, and they go with that. And so that's part of the invitation to parents, is to not take that pressure that they're getting from the traditional school system, or the dominant school system, I should say, because traditionally, actually, we didn't learn the way that we learn in schools now, right? If we think about traditionally, schools, 150, 200 years, we've been doing it in this particular one, in a brick and mortar building.
Yeah.
So just opening it up, and then that lets the pressure off you, and to have faith that your kids are going to be okay. And then you don't have to have the fights about the worksheets and all the things that they're resisting anyway.
Right.
Yeah. I'd like to add on to that. I think it's important for parents to separate what's a real threat from their own anxiety. And there's a lot in our society that feeds that anxiety and feeds that monster. And for example, the fact that a lot of decisions, public officials have been slow to make some decisions, so that's not very helpful to parents. But this really is about a mindset shift, about centering yourself and deciding where you stand and where you're planted. This is also about the book itself, the sentiment, the feeling of the book is about first grounding yourself, but then also always, always, always protecting the parent-child relationship. And so the question for me is what I'm doing, is the way I'm about to respond to my child going to help or harm our relationship? And I think that's a great measure to use in thinking about what our long-term relationship looks like. And I think if you can manage a lot of that anxiety and just understand that is something that is internal, I think that helps deal with some of that deficit thinking. So in my recently former life, I taught people who were training to be school librarians. And I was saying to them, you are now 21st century leaders. You are the ambassador to the classroom right now. And so, and they were saying to me, as they were trying to put these projects together that they were due at the end of the semester, they were saying, well, I don't know what to do for my project because I want to do something to help kids come back to school, but they're so behind. They're going to be so lost. They have the summer slide anyway. And I said, stop. Let's stop right there. So that's a scarcity way of thinking. And it suggests that school is the foundation and home builds on top of school. But we're saying home is the foundation and school builds on top of home. Also, let's reframe that whole thing. So you mean to tell me that this kid was home for 4 or 5 months and they didn't learn a single thing? So what about the kids who were home and they had to take care of 2 siblings?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they learned something, even if it was reading off a macaroni box, how to fix stuff on top of the stove or in the microwave.
Yeah.
So they're, again, able to solve their own problems and deal with their own challenges. And I said, what about this? What if you went back and you said, instead of saying, you know, I know you just sat around playing video games all day long. Here's a worksheet. You got to get back into school mode. You got to get with it. What if instead of saying that, you said, I bet you played some cool video games while you were out, right? So tell me about some of the characters. What were the storylines? So who got you into the game? Did you talk to somebody online about the game? Did you meet some friends online? Well, what did you learn? You know, kind of walk me through it. Or I know you got to play with some friends. Tell me about that. And what that says is that home is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Home, parents, family add value to the child's life and not just worksheets. So that's why, you know, we say it's mindset, you know, and it's starting with self first in a very abundant way of thinking.
So it's a fight against structure. That's that's what I'm hearing. And, you know, that's what the last 120 days has been all about in so many respects, is fighting against structure. And mindset is, you know, once you get over the idea of what normal looks like, and you start to craft out, you know, I love what you said about the fact that the kids are still learning. And that, you know, sometimes structure hinders the ability to learn. I think I heard you say that too.
Yes.
And so how do we as, you know, parents, how do we change, how do we, you know, kind of shift and understand that? How do we in short order step into some level of comfort? I don't even want to say comfort because I don't even like that word too much. Confidence. Step into confidence, and understanding that our children will learn. They can learn virtually. It doesn't have to be the structure, the timeline, the pattern, the methods that we have become accustomed to, but we can create some other means and methods for them to be able to learn. And I get what you said about parents being some anxiety about kids being behind and being held back. Well, guess what? At the end of the day, they're all behind.
Right.
We're all on point.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody's behind. But just being, how do you help them get beyond that point so that they can develop some confidence and some consistency, balance between family, education, and the business?
Yeah. Well, you know, I always tell my children and parents that I work with as well that, you know, our roles as parents is to work ourselves out of a job. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do is, you know, throughout their developmental stages, we want them to need us less and less and less. And that's hard, you know. I mean, I have a 23-year-old now. It's hard. And, you know, some days she needs me more and I get 50 texts in one day. Other days I don't hear from her. But that's where she should be. And if you look at the structure, I'm glad you talked about the structure that we have set up for most children. We tell them what to do, when to do it, when to eat, when to go to the bathroom, what they need to learn. No, you're not doing it that right. You can't learn math that way. You have to do it this way. And we structure everything. And then we expect them to be autonomous and confident as adults and to all of a sudden magically, you know, leave the nest and they're ready for adulting. So if you think about it, kind of for parents building the confidence, what you want to do is you want to give them opportunities when you're there to support them, to make mistakes, and to learn what do you do when you mess up. And when is it we have a thing in our family, little deal, big deal. So you didn't get the worksheet done or you did the whole thing wrong. it's really a little deal. The schools make it a big deal, but it's a little deal. Like nobody hurt, nobody's sick, everything is really fine. There's a worksheet that was done improperly. It's not a big deal, right? And so helping the child figure out, how do you navigate that? How do you approach those mistakes that are relatively little deals so that you can learn how to mess up and make things better? And that's what we need in the business world too, right? We try things out. We might do an investment that didn't go so well. Okay, how am I going to recover from this, rather than I'm never going to try that ever again. I'm going to close my business. I'm done. So I think, for entrepreneurs, if they think about the things that helps them move their business forward and what they need and how to foster that and nurture it in their children, then you can, again, let go of some of those external pressures and be like, no, you know what? Actually, I really want my child to be creative. And I don't care that you painted a squirrel purple. It's a really cool squirrel. I love that
Funny
squirrel.
you say that, because as you were talking, what I wrote down is, as entrepreneurs, teach your kids to be the problem solver and the outside of the box thinker that you wish you had.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and also this idea of being behind, and I understand where it's coming from. I get it, but it's only behind on the curriculum that somebody else is saying is important.
And a lot of it is antiquated.
It is.
Right, yes.
It is.
And what we're saying is that there's so many different ways to do things. And this is definitely the group to talk to and have a conversation about doing things a different way, because entrepreneurs are creative. One of the things that Robin and I talk about a lot, and she knows I can get on my soapbox and stand there all day talking about project-based learning. And project-based learning is the child decides they want to learn how to do something. And so what they have to do with the teacher's facilitation is go out and figure out everything they need to learn about that, or everything they need to learn in order to be good in that area. So the example that we use all the time is, so this guy, he said, oh, all these kids, they want to learn how, they want to be rappers. Okay, let's work with that. So, you're a rapper, so you have to keep up with your finances. You have to know how to work sound equipment. You need to be able to read a contract. You need to book travel. So what all do you need to know in order to be a rapper and not be a busted broke rapper? So what all, and business owners are we epitomize project-based learning. Yeah. So, and Lisa and I were talking earlier, when I got into my business a year ago, I was like a deer in the headlights and just like, oh my goodness, what is this world? It's so crazy. And it was so different from the world that I came from, which is academia, and so much less structure than academia. But because I was interested in this project, because I was committed to the project, I learned what I needed to learn in order to get to the next level, the next level, the next level. And I saw I was inspired by my own child who did self-directed learning this past year and had the best school year he's ever had, and he's 14 years old. Wow. Why? Because we removed the structure. He got to work on what he wanted to work on. He structured his day. He ate lunch when he wanted to eat lunch. He sat down on the couch when he wanted to sit on the couch. And he would bring his whatever he took to school, he would bring it home, and he would continue working on his music into the afternoon without us even having to tell him to do that. So my point is that it really is time for us to reimagine what is happening here. So I know, part of the anxiety is driven by, we need to make sure they get in college, and Robin can talk more or better about that. We need to make sure they get to college, and they won't get a scholarship, and they won't get this, and they won't get that. But the game has changed.
Big time.
So
everybody.
I want to stop in. And yesterday, Kimberly and I were interviewing a math teacher for the Pearl School, and part of our philosophy is that youth are always included in all decision making. So my son volunteered to be on the interview committee, And we were talking about online learning and online education. And I said to him, like, well, what do you think about this? A lot of people are concerned about the online learning environment. And if you remember, Kimberly, he just looked at us and he's like, you can learn everything online.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is the thing about, we talk about this a lot too. So here it is, us Gen Xers and boomers are telling kids what 21st century skills are, and they're like 20 paces ahead
of us. Yeah.
And when you say to a 16-year-old, people are skeptical of online learning, they look at you just like you're crazy, right?
Yes.
We've said the word worksheet so much in this talk already, and as we're thinking, and Lisa, you mentioned antiquated, I was thinking too, like worksheets are so 20th century. Like the fact that we're still doing these packets, that the kids hate them. Why are we still doing this? And when the kids get stuck, they look at Khan Academy themselves. They go on YouTube. They're learning online. They're learning how to do their music production online. Yeah. So I think it's a mindset shift for us older people, not for the young people and people that are saying like online learning is bad. It's just bad. It really shows the generation gap. I mean, I feel like we're not admitting that they're online learning what they need to know, including like how to make the macaroni or whatever, right?
Yeah. I'm laughing because I have to facilitate a training for project managers on Friday. And every time you say worksheet, in my mind, I'm like, Lord, I have to get the worksheets done. Now I'm trying to figure out, okay, so what am I going to do instead of worksheets?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But you know what, to add to that, a couple of quick things. Number one, it's here to stay.
Yes.
This is it. This is where we are.
That was my next question. Predict. Yeah.
And number two, again, just thinking about this deficit mindset and this narrative that these people don't have this and they don't have that. But I was told as early as 2010, and I don't know if I may have been late coming to the party, that development should be mobile. You have to think mobile, mobile, mobile. So I was talking to one of my students, who teaches at an elementary school, and I was asking her, well, can the kids log in from home? And she's like, yeah, but they had these little strips of paper with the password this long. Okay, the little kindergartners with their developing fine motor skills are not going to sit there and type out a 30-character password.
Right.
But if the thought had been mobile, 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 you can do drips of learning on your phone. Mm-hmm. So, and also, and I'm saying this, and I promise you, I'm not trying to be vulgar, but people find porn and everything else online. And I'm so serious right now. You make things work because you want them to work. Right. Mm-hmm. That industry wants things to work, so they make things work.
They make it accessible. They make
it accessible, and they're always plugged into the user experience, and making sure people don't have to wonder. They don't have to ask a single question.
That's why Apple's so successful.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And there's a wonderful article on medium.com written by Dr. Kimberly Douglas, and it talks about how schools can no longer afford to see themselves, the people who lead within the schools no longer see themselves as hierarchical organizations. Mm. They really have to start to see themselves as social networks, which means that they have to start to behave like social influencers. Yeah. So the top-down commands, it's not working. And so when you persist and you insist on doing that top-down, where parents need to be doing this, and kids need to be doing this, and so-and-so needs to be doing this, that's why parents don't feel good about this, because that no longer works. And so then the question becomes for parents, how much can I step back from this? In the book, we are encouraging people to consider homeschool as an option, but we also understand that it is not workable for every family. but we leave people with something to think about, or some considerations that maybe weren't there before. But we understand that some people, school is what they have, but you have to manage your household.
Yeah.
They need you now.
So I'm not sure how to respond to that. Yeah, so that kind of leads me to this question of, it's not the kids that, and you've already said it, it's not the kids that need to adapt, because they've been living in this world for as long as they've been in this world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a Gen Z,
Yeah.
and she has been fighting status quo since the day she was born.
Mhm.
I mean, since the day she was born. And so it looks like the world is catching up to her
Yes.
ideas in the framework of how the world looks for her. And I've been the one that had to catch up.
Mhm.
And I've been the one that had to, advocate for her, because everybody else was having a hard time catching up with it too. How do we reconcile that in a manner that doesn't make us all feel like we're going crazy?
Well, I would like to see us scrap the entire educational system now that we have a timeout and rebuild.
Well, that's essentially what's going
Mhm.
to almost happen,
Mhm.
I think, by default, because I was watching CNN the other night, and they were talking about just the disparities across the nation of all the schools and ideas, and who's going back to school, who's not going back to school, who's doing hybrid. The large institute, I have colleges and universities in my area who are going completely virtual, yet I have family members who have traveled back to school in the South because they're opening the doors and the kids have to be there.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile all of that? How do we we got to create some type of method and process and get things caught up. Otherwise, I don't know. I think it's going to be much more chaotic than it needs to be for too long.
Well, here's my plug. Like, there's a great article on Medium by Dr. Robin Harwick called "Let's Not Go Back." And I think people are. I hear what you're saying, and there's a lot of changes, but there are a lot of people that are really stuck in the way that we've been doing things.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my work has been around disproportionality. And that's one of the things that, when we were talking about our book, that was one of the things I'm very passionate about is as a researcher, looking at the numbers around disproportionality in the schools. And that's just proportionality of African-American kids, Latino youth, and Native youth being expelled and suspended at much higher rates, and other types of disciplinary action, the type of schools that they're in, extremely segregated schools that have police in the schools instead of positive behavior support, all of these things, right? And we were talking in a conversation the other day about if people don't see it, it's because they don't want to see it, because it's really obvious, right? And we can't spend any more time with the research about these things, because we have volumes and volumes of research for decades, and we know this is the way that it's been, and the system is working as it's designed to do so.
Right.
And so this is the opportunity to say, and for families, say, no more. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not subjecting my kids to that. And I'm not saying that, for some kids, they have a pleasant school experience and it works for them. I'm talking about, the children that we know are suffering in the system the way that it is. And for us as advocates and parents to say, no more, we're not doing this anymore. The narrative is saying that we need to get the kids back to school because school is safer than home. School's not a safe place for a lot of kids for a lot of reasons. And so we need to say, like, enough, we're going to do it differently. And so what we are proposing are options. Homeschooling, co-op schooling, democratic schooling, looking at, other options that work for your family. And, I've talked to some people and there's some pushback around, well, are you giving up on the public education system? And I'm thinking about this a lot as a special educator. Of course, I believe in a free and appropriate public education, but what we're not getting is the appropriate piece.
Mm.
And as long as the appropriate piece isn't there, I say, Mama, if it's not working for your kid and you have another option, it's not your job to save the public education system. It's your job to make sure that your kid isn't traumatized by going through that system, and think about the options of what's available. And in the book, we talk about your community. Our communities are much richer than a lot of times people are telling us that they are. And so what kind of community network and supports can you have through this period, and how can you change? What does learning look like for you and your families and in your community? And being the revolution and being a radical change, because this is what our kids need. And as an educator, I can tell you there is nothing more exciting than seeing a disengaged kid light up and get excited about learning. Like, it makes me go crazy. I love it so much. And that's the transformation that can happen, instead of like Kimberly was saying, her son coming home and continuing on his homework, because he's working on a project that he loves, rather than you having to say 15 times, come on, it's almost bedtime, you still haven't finished that, right? And that's the transformation. And for people that are working at home, and your children in your home space too, when you're all in harmony because you're all doing stuff that you love, the conflict is much lower and you can get more work done too, in my experience. I've been working at least partially at home since my daughter was born. So for 23 years, I've always navigated that in my work life. And so, I've had from little tiny babies to teenagers to 20-year-olds in my house while I'm trying to work. And, that having that flexibility for everyone brings the balance into the family.
I mean, and it's true. You really are the revolution. Yes, there are things happening out there with, against police brutality. There are things happening out there in the political sphere, but really inside your home, you have to be it. You have to say that we're not going to let anxiety rule us. You have to say, you know what, we need to try something totally different. How about we work on the flow of things around here and how we come together? Or how about, how can I include my kid in this activity so that they can learn and they can contribute? Or so even if your kid's coming home with something that feels really difficult or you can't help them, ask questions. Having them explain things to you helps them learn things. Just be curious about what they're doing, and find ways to include them, because they are part of the family system. And if kids don't have any responsibility or they don't have any input, then the message to them is they may as well not be there, because the family could survive without them. And so do something to create a different narrative that says that that's not true, that you are a valuable and valued member of this family. And really what we're talking about is thinking about yourself in a very different way, thinking about your family in a very different way, thinking about the community in a very different way. And so school isn't this thing over here where we learn right here. School is all of this.
Everything.
And it really, again, it comes back to the mindset about what you think that you can do in that space. And there's a lot that you can do in that space.
Yeah. So I've been feeling, and I've been saying it a lot over the last several, I want to say weeks, but it's really more like months, that I feel like I need to build new boundaries. The old structure, the structure that even from a work standpoint, rise at 6, be at work at 8, be behind the desk, and then get home at 5. That whole structure doesn't work. It hasn't been working. And so you have to tear down those old walls and build something different that meets, you kind of where the time is right now. What do you have to say? What advice do you have to give to parents, in 2 weeks, right? In 2 weeks, they have to get ready to do something, make a decision, create some level of flow in the home. What do you have to say to them to help them get ready in 2 weeks to prepare for that best environment for the kid, for their children, and then for themselves?
I say lower expectations for everyone in the house. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
Cut yourself some slack. Everybody, the kids, you. Some days, if you, if all you can do that day is put on your slippers and, make yourself some oatmeal and drink some tea and just slow, like this is the time where we get to go slow. And, when I was in the US, I was guilty of working 80 hours a week, and I worked multiple jobs, and everybody told me how great it was and how amazing it was. And when I came to Mexico and, people would say, oh, I'm going to be in your town. Can we meet for lunch? I was like, oh, I don't have time for lunch. And the people would say, you have to eat. What do you mean you don't have time for lunch? And that mindset shift where I was like, oh, wait, I do have to eat. I should eat. That's right. That's something that we should do. And so learning to slow down. And I think you're right. And a lot of people are saying that they find themselves working all the time now and working more. And I think that some of that might be true for people that don't have boundaries, but some of it might also be that we have longer periods of the day that we're working. We don't have a hard stop at 5. Right. But for me, with parenting with kids in the house and being, working multiple jobs, it has worked for me. Like Kimberly laughs at me because she'll say, can we meet at 10? Nope, we can't do 10 a.m. because I have yoga. I'm doing yoga in the morning. And that means that, yes, I take a longer break in the afternoon and I work later in the evening, but there's more balance throughout the day. And so I think lowering those expectations, and with the kids as well, having, especially if you're not tied to the school district's structure, letting the kids flow through the day and do their homework when they feel most awake. If we're getting our teens up at 7 o'clock in the morning to start on their worksheets, and we know that their brains don't work very well, like we don't want to force them to start the thing that they hate the most at 7 o'clock in the morning when their brains, from what we know of adolescent development, they don't function well at that time. So if they want to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're in a pandemic. If that's working for them, let them do it.
Yeah.
So, and I, going along with what Robin is saying, we don't have to try to make things happen. And this thing needs time to work itself out and for some things to play out. So we don't always have to be the narrator of the story. But I think your question to me sparked ideas about whether or not they should go to a building or be virtual. And I will say, and I've been very careful about weighing in on this in public, but here's what I encourage parents to think about. You can't see the trauma that's happening in your child who is having to go back in a school building. And they may not express that to you. So there's a lot of different ways to listen. And there may be a lot of fear and a lot of trauma happening that you'll have to go back and pick up the pieces later, because it is frightening. And it's this big unknown for all of us.
It's frightening for me.
It's scary. I have a doctor's appointment next week, and I'm like, can you just do something over the phone? Because we don't fully understand the risk, because there's so many confusing messages out there. Yeah. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, if there's a way that you can keep your kids home, I would say keep them home. Because I think a lot of them are going to end up back home anyway, because a pandemic doesn't just switch on and off like a light switch. That's just not how it works. It's never worked that way. So look, because a lot of times we don't think we have resources until we start looking at things in a very different way. Yeah. Turn over every rock in your life and see who can help. and still allow your kids to be safe, because there's some people you don't want to leave your kids with. But if there's a way, if just thinking creatively, and Robin talks about, talk to your neighbor. You guys might be in the same situation and you don't even know it because you don't talk to each other. Because people are working all the time and constantly on the go and constantly moving, you could have two people in a very similar situation or who could really help each other out. And it doesn't happen because there's no conversation happening. You're always passing each other.
Yeah.
So really look around, and we talk a lot about community asset mapping and looking to see, beyond our field of vision, what's out there and what could be helpful to us. We really, really, really have to imagine life in a different way, because it's not the same. And it really is demanding something different from us.
It is absolutely. And even in the work environment, everything has been flipped upside down. And quite frankly, it was flipped upside down further, long time ago. It didn't just happen. We've just become aware and in tune with it. It, kind of slapped us in the face, but that change has been happening with Gen Z. I can tell you that because I have one.
Yeah, it's true. And their expectations are different. So I think that's one of the other things. And, we haven't been as explicit as we are in a lot of other conversations. Talk to your kids. Ask them what they want. Ask them what they think the solutions are. What are they worried about? What do they think would be a successful school year? And I think that is a really powerful question. Tell me, what is a successful school year for, for you? And yesterday, again, in the conversation we were having with my son, he was saying that he wanted a few more metrics than I expected him to. Like, he wanted a little bit more of a roadmap for at the end of this math class, I would like to know going in, what am I supposed to learn during this class? And he, and that was him advocating for himself. I would like to know what the roadmap is and what I'm going to get out of this. And so, asking kids what's important to them right now and believing them, it's also really powerful, because we want to teach our kids to self-advocate, but we don't give them much opportunity to do it. And if they can't practice it with us, how are they going to learn that skill? So when they go into the job, they're not the one that's being mistreated in the workplace and is afraid to speak up because their voice has never really been heard before.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you both. Lots of enlightening information, and then, just making us aware and cognizant of the fact that it's all about our own anxiety, our own stress. And quite at the end of the day, we just have to be agile, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's not to say there are some very real things happening to people that are beyond their control. And I always want to be careful to acknowledge that. But then there's a transformation that has to happen within us individually, that we won't be able to survive if we don't make that transformation.
Yeah. Yep. Well, the world is changing. It's moving, and we don't want to be left. Get on the train or get left behind.
For sure.
Well, listen, I appreciate you both joining me for this conversation. It's absolutely necessary. I know there has been a lot of anxiety. I'm hoping that everybody that's listened in this evening has been able to relieve some of that anxiety and be prepared to step in with some confidence to create, a new opportunity for growth between parent and child and business owner. Can you share, before we wrap up, can you share with everybody how they can learn a little bit more about you?
I have a website. It's robinharwick.com. They can find me there. And then for the Pearl School, if you're interested in learning more about democratic education, I would love to talk with you about that. You can find us on Facebook at the Pearl High School, or also we're online at thepearlhighschool.org.
Awesome.
And you can reach me at drkimberlydouglas.com. And Douglas is spelled with 2 S's. And also, after we conclude here, I will put a link to our book, You Are the Revolution, Education that Empowers Your Black Child and Strengthens Your Family.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I appreciate you. And
thank you.
Continue to strive, survive, and thrive.
Thank you. Lisa. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right, you guys take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Wow. I didn't know what was going to come out of this conversation. I knew it was going to be greatness, but there were some things that I actually really had not considered. And I love the fact that, time, we are catching up with time as parents because things have been changing for quite some time. And we're learning that. Our children have been telling us that for a while. If you have children that are, of the same generation as my youngest, then you're realizing that. But one of the things that I took out of this is really creating the flexibility, allowing yourself to rebuild and redesign, get away from the old structures. There's been a rebellion against structure for quite some time, at least the structures that in which we currently exist. So there's been a rebellion against that. So step away from that for a moment and allow together your family to create what that new normal looks like for yourself, for your family, for education, and as well as for your business. Because we are going to find out that in business, the way that the normal 9 to 5 is not going to be the normal 9 to 5 moving forward. I want to thank you guys for joining me this evening for this great conversation. I will be back again next week to continue the conversation about agility and creating and getting back to the basics during this COVID environment. So join me next week. I will have Carolyn Walker. She's a workforce training and development consultant. And we're actually going to talk about changing the structures of the workforce and getting geared up to really re-engage a virtual environment and virtual working and all of that comes along with it, and stepping into the new normals of business from that standpoint. We will be back here next Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, I am Lisa Anderson, Strategic Business Advisor, Virtual CFO with a Novel Transformation, and your $1 Million Mentor. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.